Hi, it's Joy, and today I'm going to be watching House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 3, Second of His Name. I am so excited to jump into another episode of this show. I have loved the first two. Once again, please no spoilers. I didn't get any spoilers in the previous videos. No spoilers for the book, Fire and Blood. I do not know what happens, other than the sort of common knowledge bits that have been teased throughout Game of Thrones or that everyone has talked about before the show came out. I don't know. I am rambling, but I'm so excited to jump back into this show. A reminder that, as always, you can find the unedited version of this reaction on my Patreon. And let's go. Damon's here. I mean, I do feel like the prisoners are most likely also going to be burnt alive.
Yeah, my friend.
You're going to be burnt or squished. Yeah, I feel like Damon doesn't actually care about anybody here. His own glory. And maybe the glory of Westeros, as long as he's a big part of that. The individual common folk, nah.
He has your eyes, your grace.
Yes, he does.
Whoa.
And you have my nose, don't you?
2 years
How much?
old and already our boy has a king.
Just another 2 years slipped by. I mean, it makes sense. I'm pretty sure this story takes place over a long period of time, but whoa. I really wanted to see some of the fallout from the last episode at the court in terms of, like, what happened next, how Rhaenyra reacted, how Alicent reacted with her. Now it's kind of, a lot will have changed in these 2 years. A lot of the dynamics would have already shifted, and I'm sad that we didn't get to see those dynamics shift.
It is Aegon's second name day. His infancy is behind him. It only remains for Viserys to name him heir to the throne.
I wouldn't be so sure.
And sabotage our fleet under the cover of dark.
Not today, Tyler.
The matter of the stepstones is regrettably...
I don't
It's been
think...
3 years. It can wait another 3 days.
Yeah, of course, it's been 3 years. The kid's already 2.
ever to intervene.
Thailand.
Now is the time.
Daemon and the Sea Snake started their war without his grace's leave.
Yeah.
Were he to intervene now?
Her heart broken.
The same, they sat here, didn't they, reading from the book.
Grace. Did I say to stop?
That was the story they were reading, wasn't it? Or she was testing her on.
Decided to remain here and read instead.
Rhaenyra hiding here and reading is not going to win you any favours from the other people. As much as I relate to it.
For you to join us.
I don't-
Much to celebrate.
I do not blame her for not wanting to be involved in this day with this kind of remarriage with a child that might likely replace her. That, you know, to someone that was her close in her own age. Her father is married. Her childhood friend. It is very disturbing. But I wanted to see, like, these two. They set them up so interestingly in the first couple of episodes. I would have liked to have followed their journey over the last 3 years, but at least we can see where they are now. It's sad to see them in the same place.
Perhaps the hunt could be fun.
She's still
To the King's
trying.
command. None of it needs be this way in truth, Rhaenyra.
Alicent had no choice. Like, I understand Rhaenyra being upset, and I completely understand it, but if anything, her father chose Alicent out of all of the people. And Alicent was ordered to become his friend by her father, and when the king says, "Will you marry me?" you can't very well say, "Actually, no, I'm good, thanks." You'd have to be made of some pretty strong stuff and completely okay with losing losing your family, losing everything. Right now, Alicent has done nothing wrong, and I wish Rhaenyra could see that a little bit, that she's also just a young girl who is trying to survive in this world. But I can also understand Rhaenyra wanting nothing to do with any of it.
The whole of our... And you have duties.
As I am ceaselessly reminded.
I'm sorry?
As I am ceaselessly reminded.
You would need to be reminded if you ever attended to them.
No one's here for me.
She thinks you've replaced her. Either reassure her that you haven't, or let her go. You know, you either have to be like, "Rhaenyra, you're my heir. Step up to the plate." Or say, "Just Rhaenyra, you're no longer my heir. Go read in the garden. We'll marry you off to someone." Which, again, you know, I hope doesn't happen, but she's kind of in an impossible position at the moment, with everyone around her believing that this new marriage and these new children will be her replacements. But it's also not Alicent's fault.
Aegon the Conqueror bade second of his name. Here's to his grace on his second name day.
Second of his name, they're already trying to get him to get the throne. You gotta fight for this if you want it, and I know she will. And she's only 17, 18 at this point. You have done a shit job of parenting her throughout this change.
Your dear uncle is the great mind behind this war, is he not?
I wouldn't know. I've not
Which
spoken to Damon in
also
years.
isn't Rhaenyra's fault.
Damon made his choices, Lady Kira. The princess was more suited to the role.
She's trying to speak up for you to a
Put an
point.
end to it.
Like, I am under no illusions that Alicent will stay on Rhaenyra's side, and she may be very soon about to shift away from it. But I think it's just so interesting to look at these dynamics here, because Alicent is trying, from what we've seen, to bridge the gap to her old friend, to try and, you know, not have them be so far apart, to wish that they could be as close as they ever were, just now bound by creepy old men, father bound, you know, father wife, etc. mess. But so far, she has tried to be kind to Rhaenyra, and even in this point, sticking up for Rhaenyra. She could have joined in with her. Oh, she could have been like, oh, well, you know, there'll be another heir soon, you know, or soon I'll have plenty of heirs to choose from. She could have made any kind of snide remarks that maybe wouldn't have been the most intelligent when nothing has been said, but she could have made them if she wanted to be adversarial towards Rhaenyra. And yet I can also completely understand why to Rhaenyra, her close friend, replacing her mother and having children that could replace her does feel like an ultimate betrayal. But Rhaenyra's old enough to look at it and to realise Alicent didn't really have a say. I am positive that as Alicent gets older and as her boy, and that girl, actually I was going to say boys, but I have no way of knowing if she's going to have another boy. As her children get older, she will fight for their rights and fight for their chance to be on the throne. The current law and precedent is that boys have rank over girls, so therefore I can see her doing that, but I do think Rhaenyra's kind of bridge between them is not helping, and it breaks my heart to see it happen when neither girl is at fault for the situation they are currently in, and yet they are so far apart from each other.
Hierarchy for good. We've been dragged into it by your uncle and the sea snake.
And how have you served the one with late Lady Red Wine by eating cake?
And Rhaenyra, this is not going to win you any favours when you want to become queen. I get she's hurting and she's just lashing out at everybody around her, but it's weakening her own position. It's not how you play the Game of Thrones. I just want them to be happy. But I'm on episode 3. They're never going to be happy ever again. They were happy briefly in the first episode, and that is it.
Lord Jason Lannister.
Gathered that from
Lannister.
I don't think we've been, but the best sport is to be found at Castle Rock. Near my
Where I
home.
wish to take you when we are wed.
Have you been? I don't have a dragon pit, of course, but I do have the means and resources to build one.
This is not the smooth suit you're thinking it is.
To house dragons, of course. I'd do anything for my queen. Or lady wife.
Jesus Christ, this man was not smooth. It's quite creepy.
Is that what I am to you? A prize to proffer about to the great
This
houses?
is not the place. It's a very public gathering to...
Age, Rhaenyra. Marriage proposals all. And I have tried often to discuss it with you.
This is not the place either of you for this discussion.
Because I do not wish to get married.
Even I do not exist above tradition and duty, Rhaenyra.
Excuse me, Your Grace.
You both need to learn the right place to do this.
Of a white hart.
Of course there
The
has.
stag is the king of the King's Wood, Your Grace, a regal portent for Prince Aegon's name day.
You put the white heart there, you idiot.
Was I named heir to the Iron Throne, so that I might only further raise the standing of a Lord of Castle Rock?
Well, they are an ambitious bunch.
Do you want me to kill him?
How lucky you are to have a say in your own life.
Many in the realm would gladly trade position with you, Princess.
It doesn't make it any easier
None of
for
them has
her,
ever
but
held my position. I may be the Princess of Dragonstone, but I'm toothless.
you have also never starved.
One
White Hart was the symbol of royalty in these lands.
And on this day of all days.
Yes, coincidental.
Signs of importance, Your Grace, but if the
You're not
gods
subtle.
wish to show their favor.
Rhaenyra is not pleading her case well by becoming sullen and angry. Though obviously I can understand why she is.
And feel herself well compensated for her loss in station.
What loss of station?
Everyone thinks your son is going to
If you
become...
were to name young Aegon heir,
Everybody believes it. A boy should ascend to the throne over a girl. It's the way of things as far as they're
I had
concerned.
assumed, as he's your firstborn.
I did not decide to name Rhaenyra my heir on a whim. All the lords of the kingdom would do well to remember that.
Yes, you're a bit of an idiot. You were no Tywin.
I want her to be happy.
You've done a shit job with that so
There is
far.
another choice beyond Castle, closer to home.
Who do you have in mind?
Prince Aegon.
A literal brother who is 2.
Betroth them.
I came here to hunt.
The ridiculous thing is, if they were closer in age, he'd have considered it.
Not to be suffocated by all this fucking politicking.
That is your life.
Let us speak no more of it.
That was his way of trying to make sure his grandson took the throne. Because right now it is up in the air as much as the tide would want. Like, the land will kind of expect the young prince to take the throne. There is every chance that Viserys will stick to his guns with Rhaenyra and that she will prove capable and the people will win round to her. It would be a neat solution if the boy was not 2 and they were not siblings. Not that the Targaryens care about the second part. Funny. I saw a TikTok that made me think that this is a brilliant portrayal in a way. Obviously it's not an actual portrayal, but showing us what it would have looked like when Catherine Howard married Henry VIII. A young girl, against her will most likely, but doing what her family and the king want, marrying the king, who is much older than her.
It would seem to me the best match for Rhaenyra is the son of the sea snake, Sir Lenor. Some years ago I counseled you to take his sister to wife. The reasoning remains the same.
It's what I said at the time, at least the
Lenor
ages
is
were
of
closer.
pure Valyrian descent. We must pray, of course, that Lenor survives the fighting in the Stepstones.
And that, if he goes for that, will encourage him to intervene in the Stepstones. Is she gonna find the White Heart?
Princess, I must make a final plea that we return to the...
Do you think the realm will ever accept me as their queen?
Source of all her troubles.
I'll have no choice but to, Princess.
That was true once. But if... I mean, right now Aegon is 2. Yeah, they would definitely pick her over a 2-year-old in a minority and all the mess of that. But if her father lives for longer and the boy becomes older and more capable, then it wouldn't matter how wonderful Rhaenyra was. The tradition and the ordinary people and the lords would much rather have a boy. And the younger he is, the more they can control him, whereas she's older and clearly knows her own mind. You have a knife, a dagger, a sword? Oh no, you have a knight of the Kingsguard though. Fucking heck, yeah, she finished it off. She doesn't like how they squeal as they die. It's one way to get your emotions out. Is this going to be the moment she stops kind of passively letting things happen and starts actively fighting?
Because I no longer believe.
Believe what, my love?
Poor girl.
But naming her heir would begin to set things right.
Oh, it did.
I never imagined I would remarry.
Right now, Alicent, I think, is not scheming for anything beyond survival and her son's happiness. I think right now she would be happy with Rhaenyra being queen. Maybe that will obviously change.
What if I was wrong?
Oof. The first real possibility being raised from him that he might name Aegon as his heir. It's kind of like, I know Rhaenyra's been acting the way she's been acting, partly out of a sense that it would all be snatched away from her, or just when she finally was getting the recognition she maybe deserved or had always wanted, and just when she was the one that flew to Dragonstone and was able to get the egg and save the day, her father remarried to somebody that kind of felt like a bit of a slap in the face. And and is now producing sons who will oust her. If she had been being the model princess, had been like, you know, being the heir to the throne, being kind of doing the job and showing just how worthy she was, it would have taken a lot more for her father to change his mind. And now, obviously, as our real historical precedent have shown, the king dying saying my daughter's going to be the heir doesn't mean the realm will agree with it, but her being a teenager and struggling, and again, I mean, she's a teenager who lost her mother and then her dad married her best friend. I cannot even begin to understand what she's going through there. Just breaks your heart to think that, like, human folly can be your greatest downfall, because if she'd been the girl we've seen inside her, the woman that is there this whole time, she would be not being, he wouldn't yet be considering replacing her. So it was not the sign they'd all hoped for. Maybe it wasn't planted after all. And this is hardly a glorious kill for the king, when the creature is being held down.
Right here, Your Grace.
Oh my god, it even has to be shown where to do it! Glory be to the king. I don't need this. Hunting for sport is ridiculous. Aren't you powerful? Oh, my king, congratulations! How glorious you are today. It was held down and it took you 2 whole blows. I'm proud. The white stag. And it came to her. What does that tell you? She let it live. She didn't kill it for sport or pleasure. Is that going to be the thing that bolsters her to fight for it and not just sit back and be angry at the world for taking from her? Though I cannot blame her for doing that.
If Viserys were to name him heir, the realm would.
She, at this point, wouldn't want to fight for that. She would have supported Rhaenyra. That will change. It's her kid. Of course it will.
Does this not please you? You mustn't ignore the certain truth that if Rhaenyra were to step over Aegon to ascend the throne, the realm would tear itself apart.
You've used your daughter
also
as a
obeisance
pawn
to
since
her.
she was a baby.
Our house among them. What of my son? Would you have me raise a man to steal his own sister's birthright?
It is Aegon that's being robbed. He's the firstborn son.
This
of
man
the
is
king.
masterful
To
at
deny that he is
manipulating.
heir to the throne is to ascend.
Alicent still cares about Rhaenyra and wants right by her friend. The more Rhaenyra pushes her away, the more the instinctive mother's love will grow. And it is weird because by the laws and their customs, is it like, you know, in English law it was literally like a law that men got the throne first. Is that the same in Westeros? Or is it just kind of precedent that, well, we prefer giving it to the boys?
The laws of gods and men.
Because by law it kind of should go to him.
Head is uncertain,
Ridiculous as
but
it
the
is when
end
Rhaenyra is
clear.
perfectly capable.
Aegon will be king. You must guide Viserys towards reason. He'll never find it on his own.
Gosh, using your daughter as a pawn even now. And she's still a loyal daughter, obedient.
How are you feeling, husband?
The gods have
Just thinks her
promised
father
me
wants what's
my
best.
indulgences.
She sounds less nervous when she speaks to him now, which is something after 3 years.
I was hoping we might discuss something.
And the nerves come back, being her father's pawn.
Rhaenyra.
I do believe that Rhaenyra will marry your grace. But she must believe it is her choice to do so.
She knows her old friend well.
Then I pose a simpler question. Is it better for the realm if the crab feeder thrives, or is vanquished?
She's got a mind on her if she's just left to do it for herself and not for her father's wishes.
Make haste
Better
to
for all
dwarf
of
them,
us.
Brandon. Do you not think my decision correct?
It is no consequence to what I think, as I'm often reminded.
You've done a bad job of
Aim
keeping
is
her
far
feel
enough
important
from
and
my
loved.
flesh.
Do you mean to replace me
Here we come to
with
it.
Alicent Hightower's son? The boy you always wanted.
It's a sore
You have him in
spot, an
hand now.
open wound.
You have no further use for me.
You have misjudged me, Rhaenyra.
All know it. Jason Lannister knows it.
Everybody else
You
thinks
said it yourself.
You've been much alone these last few years. Alone and angry. I will not live forever. I wish to see you contented.
Why have you made no attempts to breach this
I think a man will
sooner?
do it. If it was for advantage, you would have wed Lena Velaryon.
Oof. There
That
we
is
come to it. They've not had this conversation for years.
Make it yourself. Search him out. Find one that pleases you.
Why have you not spoken to her like this for the past 3 years? You should have talked to her when you chose Alicent. But he should have talked to her before he announced it to everybody, so that, you know, hi Daughty, yes, I'm going to remarry, and it is your best friend, and this is why. So much could have been avoided if men weren't so stupid.
But I swear to you now, on your mother's memory, you will not be supplanted.
I believe him. They should have been talking like this their whole lives. Pride. But the truth of the matter is, the day he dies, there will be a lot of men who won't care. Especially with people like Hightower seeing their own advantage and making sure those fans are flamed. Those flames are fanned. There will be people constantly. Hightower will be paying for people to be like, oh, your daughter's not, you know, oh yes, Rhaenyra, she's a woman. Women are weak. She'll be a slave to her husband. She won't be able to rule until there are enough people who choose to go to the other side. That doesn't mean that, like, I still support Rhaenyra over Aegon.
We have
although
16, perhaps 18
precedent is
ships.
different.
700 King's Landing will not support Daemon. Why should any of us?
Fuck. King's Landing is coming, my guy. This is not the time to anger Daemon. Fuck. Did it say he's not coming? Or is he this angry because he is coming, like, you know, Big Brother has to come to his rescue or something? Jesus Christ, this man is unstable. If he were to die to some crabs, it wouldn't be a loss to the world.
I shall pray nightly to the gods for your safe return.
So he doesn't like this because he's having somebody else come in and sweep away the glory? Is it a trick? Because I wouldn't put him past the rules of war being thrown out the window. Yep. And this is when his dragon would come in handy. But as I said previously, it might be better for the realm if he did fall. Wait for him to come to you and then you can surround him. Going to him one by one is just... Oh no! When they think they've won. Here we go. You were fools to ever leave your caves. But he made sure to do this, even at risk of his own life. Whoa. But Daemon was willing to die rather than let Viserys share in any of the glory. He wants the Crab King. At least they fight on the front lines. You have fun on your dragon, boy. Anybody could go at any moment. I mean, at least we haven't had a few seasons of caring for them. Like, genuinely, the only people I currently feel attached to are Rhaenyra and Alicent. And that will most likely change. That is one way to prove to the enemy that their leader is dead. Bring out his top half. And he got the victory before Viserys could claim any part. I wonder if the rest of them knew the king was sending troops, or if they all assumed that was a denial of aid. Well, congratulations, Daemon. You did it. This was an excellent episode of political manoeuvring and warfare. So the first half of the episode, or most of the episode, obviously revolved around the issue of the succession. We have skipped through 3 years, which I completely understand. You know, this show is, even though it's going to have multiple seasons, it's covering a very lengthy time period. We need to skip through time, but we are skipping through a lot of time. And I'm a little like, I wanted to see those early years, those early days of the new marriage and the new wedding. But I think they did a good job of, even though we skipped those 3 years, we could really see the way things had been in that time was kind of how things still were, and now things are going to start branching and changing before we go at least for another, I think it's like a 10-year time jump when we change actors for some of the roles, so I do not know when to expect that. This episode, right, so I'm going to start off with Rhaenyra, who I already love. You know, as I said, Rhaenyra and Alicent, I currently love them both and I care about them deeply, but I'm also like, this is Game of Thrones world, this is Westeros. We keep a wall around our hearts. We do not let anybody in too close because they will be taken from us. and or they'll either die or they'll become a murderous psychopath, and you'll be like, well, you know, never did like that one. Rhaenyra so far, I think you have to remember that she was 15 when her mother died and her father decided to remarry, and to quite clearly not remarry for power or prestige, but to remarry for somebody he cared for, and that somebody he cared for just so happened to be her best friend. I did see some of that in the book, or when these sort of events were happening, Rhaenyra was like 8, so obviously they aged her up, and Alicent was 17. So if we take it that Alicent was 17 in the first one, that is still your dad marrying someone that is your own age, a child. It's better than him marrying Laena. And it's crazy to me that she would have been more okay with him marrying a 12-year-old than marrying Alicent. Now, I get why, because there's a lot of personal reasons. It's one, it's kind of someone that was close to her. She now looks at everything. I suppose she looks at her entire friendship with Alicent and thinks, was any of that real? Was it all just political manoeuvring and scheming to try and get to the top? And from Alicent's father, it certainly was. Also, you know, remarrying with somebody who could immediately start pumping out heirs and then immediately producing said heir and it being a son, her position is extremely weak. And as much as, you know, I think by the end of this episode, Viserys did a very good job of proving, or at least seemingly proving to Rhaenyra that he was committed to her and to her future, doesn't really mean anything. You know, when you look at our history, and I know that, I believe somebody even said that this storyline is partly based on Stephen and Matilda, but it doesn't matter what the Lords promise to the King's face. If they think that a queen on the throne will not suit them or will not be strong enough, or that they will personally have more to gain from whoever the king candidate is, they will oust her. I mean, if we weren't already watching a TV show which clearly suggests to us that it's going to be a war, if that didn't tell us a civil war of the kind was coming, the fact that there are rival claimants to the throne, the current named heir is a girl, which goes against tradition, and obviously we cannot possibly have a woman on the throne, my lord, would be terrible. And, you know, I could definitely see that, like, by the laws of the land, or precedent of the land, it would be Aegon who would take the throne. Now, as a viewer, I fully support Rhaenyra. She's the eldest child. She is intelligent. She has been around long enough. She has shown leadership skills, courage and compassion. Now, she has also shown that she is very, very young, and I think we saw that most... I fully am on Team Rhaenyra. And I could see... You know, in this episode, you could see very much that she was still a child when all this happened. She withdrew and she was a bit sullen. And I imagine, like in this episode, the couple of times we saw Alicent interact with her, from Alicent, it was very much kind of an attempted olive branch. Every word she said, it was almost like, you know, from asking her to join them and saying, you know, it doesn't need to be like this. Like, we were once close. Can't that happen again? Nothing has changed her regard for Rhaenyra yet. And similarly, when the lady was talking about, was gossiping and talking about how she ousted Daemon, it would have been very easy for Alicent to be like, well, yes, Rhaenyra was the best choice at the time, or something. You know, something that wasn't outright treasonous, but that very much made it clear that, like, oh yeah, she's old news, my son's in town now. But instead she made a comment along the lines of, well, no, Rhaenyra was better suited. The princess was better suited to the role, i.e. better than Daemon, and, you know, is still better suited. She didn't imply that there was somebody newer. Now, I think a part of that would be because her son is 2, and it's very hard to imagine a 2-year-old taking the throne or being thrust so headstrong into the Game of Thrones. But I definitely think from Alicent there is still a care for her sister. Now, for her girl, she once loved as a best friend and a sister, to a degree. So Rhaenyra withdrawing really was biting off her nose to spite her face. You know, it was that kind of like, well, if you're going to replace me anyway, then fine, I'm going to be part of this. I don't want anything to do with it. And you married someone, not you, like, you always tell me duty is the most important thing, and instead you married somebody totally unsuitable, and she was my best friend. And that kind of, that isolation, it wasn't proving to the people that she was the best candidate to be the heir. It wasn't reassuring people that, yes, you know, tradition states it has to be a boy, but I am really capable, look at me. It was, oh, she's being so childish again, look at her, she's arguing with her dad, isn't she a little madam? You know, it was very much kind of failing to argue her own case. When in the previous episode she had so brilliantly kind of got the dragon head back and was kind of riding high. Now, I think she was going through a lot of emotions. She was clearly not in a very good mental space. And feeling very, very alone. And I think it's so interesting that in this episode, and in the previous episode to be fair, we see a lot of Viserys being like, I just wish my daughter was closer to me. You know, I wish my daughter was closer. I really wish, if only there was a way that we could be closer. Oh, you want me to go and talk to the girl? No. Couldn't possibly. Or, you know, if she doesn't immediately respond the way he wants to, it's like, well, that conversation's done with. I believe he does love his daughter. I believe there is probably a part of him that wishes he hadn't made that decision when he did, because then there wouldn't have ever been, you know, naming her as heir and then removing it is far harsher than never specifically naming her. But I also think he loved his first wife and he cares for Alicent, but it's very different. She's so young. She's a child. Stay away from her. Stop getting her pregnant, okay? 2 is enough. Just leave the child alone. He's not, and nobody involved is under any illusion that he is in love with Alicent, but I think he enjoys her company. It is quite reminiscent of the kind of relationship I imagine that Henry VIII would have had with Catherine Parr, or would have, you know, that kind of, the age of difference was not quite as extreme, but it was still there. But it was much more of a kind of, there is no illusion of love here, but instead there is friendship and companionship. Obviously Henry VIII was a psychopath, so like, Catherine Parr did her best. And I don't think he was capable of performing other duties at that point. So my thoughts are all over the place because there's just so much rich ground to cover in this show, and the fact that they keep doing time jumps mean you kind of have to re-establish the ground you're on each episode. But within this episode, I feel like we almost saw Rhaenyra grow up, or at least finish growing up, or at least, I don't know if growing up is the right phrase, but we saw Rhaenyra reach the point where she was like, okay, if I'm gonna take the throne, if it's my role, I'm going to prove that she needs to prove she's freaking worthy of it, because she is, I'm sure she is, but I think running away was quite childlike, but it was also just, she was suffocating in the court, suffocating in the knowledge that every single person around her was looking at her and going, old news, there's a new prince now, oh look at that little prince, oh isn't he being doted on, oh isn't this a big party for the new heir to the throne, people constantly calling him Aegon second of his name. He's just a little prince. He's not currently the heir to the throne. He's not second of anything, other than in line for the throne. So I think it was very much she just needed to get away, and the fact that Viserys wasn't talking to his daughter meant that she had no way of knowing whether he truly was believing all of these things, whether he was fully replacing her and just wanting to, you know, have his perfect new family and that she was no part of. But I feel like killing the boar herself both showed her that she has that fight within her, she has that toughness. So much so that when it finally came down to it, she finally said to him, well look, you want to replace me, don't you? Which needed to be said so that he could say, no I don't, I loved your mother, I won't replace you. And I actually liked that he admitted to wavering, which he did very briefly. Now, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Rhaenyra is in the next episode. I hope it is taking more of an interest in court. You know, you can't go around to prominent ladies, and even if you think, my god, this woman talking about war, all she does is eat cake, she doesn't know anything. You can't say that to her face, simply because it is a game of politics, and as much as that might be frustrating, you're not currently in a position of power where you can just be rude to everybody. So I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamic Rhaenyra takes. Then the other half of the coin, Alicent. I currently really love Alicent. Now, I could definitely see that she may well grow up to be a lot more in line with scheming like her father, but I think a key part of that is going to be that had Rhaenyra not cast her away when she married her father, I mean, it's freaking messed up. At the end of the day, Alicent's father ordered her to go and offer comfort to the king. Then, you know, he kept pushing and pushing. So much so that when the king of the whole kingdom says, Alicent, will you marry me? You can't say, actually no, I prefer men at least 10 years within my age range, sir. You have to be like, oh, I'm honoured, thank you, my lord. You know, that is the way you have to respond, most especially when your father is stood there like, my daughter, yes, this is the way, this is what we want. She'd had no choice in any of this, and I think she might even be pleasantly surprised with the fact that the king, they do have this kind of companionship. He is easy enough to get on with. I imagine he's not, you know, cruel in the bedchamber, but I don't want to think any more on that. But, you know, it's sort of marriage companionship that a lot of highborn girls and potentially lowborn girls, you know you're going to be forced to marry. It's most likely going to be someone a lot older than you. At least, you know, he's nice to me. I feel like in that sense, and I get to be queen. You know, she has a position of power and comfort. I don't think that she's going to be like, oh, if only I wasn't queen. Of course not. And it probably has entered her mind that her son is candidate to be king. But I think had Rhaenyra not acted as though Alicent had betrayed her and cut ties between them, she may well have stayed a much more stalwart defender of Rhaenyra, and it would have actually been a far more interesting dynamic when factions came into play, as I imagine they will when Aegon is older, because right now the boys do, with people pushing for her son to have this ultimate honour and then her best friend who she loved like a sister. I think in a lot of ways Rhaenyra severing that tie and blaming Alicent for the decisions of men, including her own father, both of their fathers, will be one of the final straws that makes it so that Alicent is not supportive of Rhaenyra and is pushing for her own son. So as things stand, I feel nothing but sympathy for Alicent. I think in a lot of ways she must feel terribly, terribly lonely because she is married to a man that she does not love. He's kind to her, they have a companionship, he listens to her. In that regard, she could have it a lot worse, but she could also have it a lot better. Similarly, her best friend, or someone she was extremely close to, and I do believe those two girls were very, very close, will not talk to her or look at her, and when she does talk to her, it is with this over-the-top levels of deference, which are clearly showing that she doesn't mean any of it. Her father uses her as a pawn every step of the way. I don't know how aware she is that her father isn't actually interested in Alicent's well-being or even her own Alicent's children's well-being, only in his own personal power and the house's power. I don't know how much she's wise to that yet, but her father only ever uses her for scheming, and if she were to have gone to him and said, Dad, I don't really want to marry the king, he's as old as you, if not older, I think the response would have been, tough, walk down that aisle, bitch. Does she have any friends? When you are royalty, can you be truly secure in any of your friendships? I think that is partly Rhaenyra's problem, is that she does now look back at her friendship with Alicent and assume it was all power hungry. But right now, Alicent is a very, very young girl who was being pushed and used as a pawn, forced into the bed of a man much older than her for her father's political power and gain. And one day, I think right now, she is still being the peacemaker. Right now, she still is dreaming of a world in which Rhaenyra would be her friend again, where things could go back to how they were as much as possible, and where her children could thrive within, and Rhaenyra could thrive, and it wouldn't have to be this competition, but that is not the world they live in. I do think we've seen, you know, Alicent has a sharp political mind in there. Her father is extremely politically astute. She's not stupid. She's been at court for a very long time. I imagine as she grows into her role as queen, as she grows older, because she's still very, very young, and as her children, if they are threatened by any of the dynamics that are shifting, she will become a much more savvy player of the Game of Thrones, the political intrigue, and that may well pit her against Rhaenyra. At the end of the day, for both of them, it's going to come down to the actions they take, with which side I take, if it does become the kind of 50-50 against each other that it could be. But as things stand, I feel very, very sorry for Alicent. She is in a very thankless position. No one truly is on her side. And Rhaenyra, it seems, hasn't given her... You know, I was almost wondering if by 2-3 years later, would she be already sort of being like, oh, Rhaenyra, why are you such a useless princess? Or I don't know, just being a bit more disparaging of her. But she was still trying to be like, it doesn't have to be like this, let's be friends. And I can understand Rhaenyra rejecting that. I'm not like hating on Rhaenyra for that either, but I think right now Alicent is still just that scared girl who is growing, becoming more sure of herself and her capabilities, but she's still being used by her father and the world around her. So I'm intrigued to see where her story goes as well. The rest of the political players, you know, the Lannisters, that man was no Tywin, but of course the people are going to be desperate for the hand of the princess, with a small glimmer of a chance that they could become king consort, or at the very, like, they all will assume, or precedent says, now there's a healthy young boy, the older he gets, that he'll soon be named as heir, and I'll have a princess, and, you know, all the prestige that comes with that, and the personal power and the family power. There'll be a lot more of that. Now, the idea of marrying her to House Valerion, to the older brother of the child that they wanted to marry the king to, I suggested that in the previous episode. I was like, if you truly want to align the houses, that is the way. That family still gets access to the crown, which it wanted, which apparently, and keeping them on side was really important. It made far more sense than marrying an old man to a 12-year-old. But then we married the old man to a 17-year-old, so we didn't do much better in the end. But I think ultimately Rhaenyra is very lucky that her father has suggested she can make the match herself. Not many princesses would be given that chance, or princes, to be honest. Yes, with kinder parents, they might have had a say. They might have been able to say, well, look, I'm not marrying him, he's gross. But part of being royalty is marrying who you're told to for alliances and praying you at least get on okay. And I think when Rhaenyra made the comment about, oh, they've never had to been in my position. I mean, yes, but sweet summer child, some of them starve on the streets. They don't know if they're going to eat every night, and they are still forced to marry somebody they don't love. I think they would trade places with you in a heartbeat. Shows you in a way still that the childlike idyllic bubble that she and all the rest of the nobility are in. So it's very interesting to see the way the power dynamics are playing. And so far, I don't know his name, but the guy that counselled the king to marry into House Valerian seems like somebody that the king should trust a bit more, because that opinion didn't benefit him or his house necessarily, although did it because he was kind of on Daemon's side, and it was part of what pushed him into accepting aid, because obviously if the Valerians die out in this war, then I don't know. But we've seen, Alicent's point of, well, is it going to be better for us if they win the war, if the other side win the war? Now, when it comes to the war, this war has been going on for 3-ish years, and it's been going badly. I feel like Daemon and the Valerians were just like, we're gonna go show them our might. Just ran in there, and then they were like, actually, we're just gonna hide in our cave, we're good things. And they must have had access to like some secret tunnel out to get food, or I suppose they couldn't really barricade the whole island. They were quite content to just sit in their caves, picking them off slowly. I think Daemon's response to the letter promising aid was fascinating, because anyone watching would have been like, we're abandoned, the king will not send aid, he has denied us. But it was actually saying, we will send you aid, which is fascinating. I was almost at one point wondering whether there had been some kind of switcheroo where like somebody had sent a fake letter that was like, we're not sending you aid, die. And it really, I think, gives you an insight into Daemon's mindset, whereby he wanted to be the great hero. He wanted to prove that his brother was wrong in doubting him. His brother should never have taken away the title of heir from him, because he is the great Daemon Targaryen. And he wanted to prove that by going and winning this war and removing this problem for the Iron Throne, and instead he created a big problem for the Iron Throne, and so much so that his brother was coming to fix it. Big brother's going to come and help you out there. So he did this harebrained plan that was a last resort plan when they were in last resort state, and saved the day, and now he's the great glorious Daemon Targaryen. He could easily have died during that plan. So it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout of this is. But we definitely saw that Daemon is not a stable man. We may love Matt Smith, but we don't love Daemon Targaryen. It's a very, very good episode, with the intrigue and everything, and I find so funny. I watched this and I'm like, well, maybe in the next episode, Rhaenyra and Alicent will make up and everyone will be happy. And then I'm like, Joy, you're watching a TV show in the world of Game of Thrones. No one's ever going to be happy again. Reminder that you can find the unedited version of this reaction on my Patreon, and thank you so much for watching.